Good evening and thank you for being here. Can you introduce yourself?
Okay, so I was asked to do an introduction in Bangla. So আমার নাম খেলসি, basically আমেরিকা থেকে আসছি। এখানে Asian University for Women 1.5 বছর ধরে uh, Pathways for Promise program এ ইংরেজি পড়াচ্ছি।
Okay, thank you for being with us today. So, starting off with the questionnaire, why did you choose to start learning this language? Do you learn this language due to personal reasons or since because you are in Bangladesh, or is it somehow related to your career building?
It could be kind of a mix of all three. So I've lived in a couple other different countries before, and I think, one, it makes your life easier to learn at least the basics, at the very least, of the language where you're living. And two, I think also shows respect towards the locals that I am coming from outside. I am not going to force you to speak my language, even though most of the time that tends to be the case. But I am making an effort to learn your language and learn your customs. And I'm still young in my career, and who knows where I'm going to go after this. Bengali is one of the world's most spoken languages. I think it ranks about number 6 or 7 now, so who knows down the line, maybe it will be useful.
Did you have fun in the class? Did you love learning Bangla?
I didn't learn in a class. I
Okay.
mostly learned just by myself.
Okay, that's good.
So we can talk about that in
Interest.
the difficulties of learning Bangla, the lack of
Okay.
classes.
Okay, so to the next question, what are some of the language learning techniques that you used, or what are some of the most important phrases that you should be learning in any language? Because as you told, you have been learning. I mean, you have been in different countries and you are into a lot of languages. So, what do you think are the most important or the relevant phrases that one should be learning from a language?
Right, so Bangladesh was the first country I came to live where I knew almost nothing about the culture, nothing about the language. I tried to do my research before I came, but it's very limited. And so when I arrived here, I put a lot more emphasis on survival phrases, like learning directions, learning basic haggling, learning greetings that people actually use. And I think instead of trying to learn from the grammar or learn thematic vocabulary, learning those survival phrases for me was the best option. And then once I learned those, then I could start learning, okay, why are these phrases structured like this? Why do they use this word? What are some more words that I can add to this? You had another question in there. Oh, what were some of the techniques I used? So before I came to Bangladesh, I was living in Japan. And one of the struggles of learning Bengali is that there really aren't that many resources and updated, accurate for modern life resources out there. But I did manage to find one textbook in Japan on Bengali. So I bought that and I started using that. I searched far and wide through the App Store for some Bengali apps. Most of them are not the greatest, but they did help. And there is a few that really did help. So then once I arrived here, there were a few more resources, and the library has some as well. The Lonely Planet Traveler's Guide, Traveler's Phrasebook for Bangladesh, for Bengali, has a lot of those useful phrases. So that was what really, really helped with the survival phrases especially.
Okay, that's good. So that was your own effort to learn Bangla, right? So
Yes.
would you be happy to share some of the aspects of the language that were really easy for you to learn, easy for you to learn, difficult for you to learn, or very difficult for you to learn? Because being from a different continent, it's very difficult to learn a new language, especially from Asia, which is nothing that you are experienced with. So, would you like to share some of the easy aspects or some of the difficult aspects that while you were learning Bangla?
Right, so this is incredibly personal and probably doesn't apply for most people. But it is basically a fact that the more languages you know, the easier it is to add on another one. And so Bangla is from a language family that I have never studied before, but I have studied Spanish for several years, and I'm fluent in Japanese. And oddly enough, bits and pieces from both of those languages really help. Not directly, but very indirectly. So, for example, word order in Bangla is completely different from English, more or less the same with Japanese. So that was really helpful. So I didn't have that automatic roadblock of like, why is this here and not here? And then in Bangla, there's a lot of verb conjugations, similar to Spanish. So my mind was kind of prepared for these differences. A blessing and a curse is also the amount of English words that Bangla uses. So I mean, if I don't know a word, then I can try using the English word and see if it goes through. But then I've also wasted a lot of time learning Bangla words that no one uses anymore. Some of the most difficult things in Bangla for me are still some of the pronunciation differences, especially with some consonants that have not shown up in any other languages that I've learned before, like da and da. I can pronounce them, I know where my tongue is supposed to be, but when other people use them, I really can't hear the difference enough to feel confident in distinguishing them. Same with like da and da. I think I'm pronouncing them right because I'm putting my tongue in a different spot, but I can't really hear the difference too well. So pronunciation probably is a big thing, and then what words do people actually use is another big struggle.
Yeah, by learning it from a textbook or taking this individual effort in learning, you clearly can distinguish between the theory of the language and how it can be used practically, right? So, have you had any experiences while communicating with the locals in Bangladesh? Like some words that they use were not connected to you, or some words that you were using were not connected to them? Something of that sort. Any sort of that, like, relevant experience from your life?
I'm sure there's a ton, and nothing is really coming to mind right now. But for example, dhonnobad. I mean, sometimes Bangladeshis will say dhonnobad, sometimes they'll say thank you. And I've learned that it really depends person to person which term they prefer to use, so I'll kind of use a mix. But even I try to use dhonnobad a little bit more because even if people don't use it a lot in real life, if they're locals, they get happy if the foreigner is using the Bengali word, and it's showing that I'm trying to put some effort into communicating with them and learning their language and culture. So that, I think, is one example.
Okay, it's good enough.
Okay, good enough.
Okay, so always, like, when it comes to our native language, we speak it really fast, right? Fast enough that I don't think much of the foreigners get that language, because the native languages are usually used in a very swift manner. So how do you cope up with such kind of situations when you are into this, like for example, even if it's in Chittagong, people use different accents of Bangla, right? So have you had any experience, or even if you had, or if you are about to have, like, how do you think you will cope up with that, like, the swiftly spoken native accent?
Yeah, that's what I'm really struggling with and trying to figure out right now. So one example is I took a bus to Dhaka. You get off the bus, you're tired, you just want to go to your actual destination, which now it still might take another hour sitting in traffic. And so I called an Uber. The Uber drivers in Bangladesh, they don't actually look at the app, see where you are, see where you're going. They automatically call you and ask you where you are, where you're going, and da-da-da-da-da. And if you can come to them instead of them coming to you, I found more often than not. In this one example, I got off the bus, I put in my destination, I made my Uber request, and the guy called me. And normally I can say, I am at this bus stop, I am going here, please come. And this guy was just talking rapid fire Bangla at me. And I just kept telling him, Bhaiya, mi bideshi, aste bolen, ami bujhte pari na. And then he just said the same thing in the same pace, same thing, same pace. So we went through this a million times. Bhaiya, ami Bangla bujhte pari, kintu apnar kotha bujhte pari na. Aste bolen, bhaiya, mi bideshi, aste bolen. He did not change. This went on for at least a good minute, which doesn't sound like very long, but when you're repeating the same thing and you're tired and you're stressed, goes on for a long time. So So I don't really know. I still, to this day, do not know what his problem was. But then at some point, I figured out that he gave up. He was like, okay, I'm going to come to you. So, okay, shit.
Okay. So this answers the next question as well, so it's fine. That was like an experience where you could, though you gave up, let's say that, like, you could at least communicate what you were really wanting to communicate, so that's fine. So coming up with the final question, what advice would you like to give to anyone who would like to learn Bangla, or maybe for like taking into a universal concept, like anything that you would like to tell to someone who would love to learn a different language, or let it be Bangla, any sort of that advices that you would like to give to foreigners?
All right, so I'll do one advice for foreigners and then another piece of advice for Bangladeshis for dealing with foreigners trying to learn Bangla, and they are pretty related. So for foreigners, if you want to use Bangla, sometimes you just have to be really assertive. So this ties in with my advice for Bangladeshis encountering foreigners trying to learn the language. When Bangladeshis realize that I am learning Bangla, the conversation will very often go one of two ways. So if they are blue-collar working class and they really don't understand English or they're not very educated, they will speak to me in Bangla, but like the example I just gave, very often it's heavily accented. They haven't really communicated with anyone who's from a different language background, so they don't really know how to communicate with someone whose first language is not Bangla. So they'll just do rapid fire, accented Bangla. So just keep persevering, keep saying, there's no shame in just saying bujina, or at trying to help them explain it in a different way. So there's that side. Or if they're middle class or above, very often they're more or less fluent in English, or their English is at least better than my Bangla. So then in that case, more often than not, I will say something in Bangla, and then they will say in English, "Oh, you're learning Bangla, how cute!" And then keep talking to me in English. I'm like, no, Bangla bolte chai. Right? Kota chorcha korte chai. So a big issue I've had with learning Bangla here is that it's hard to use Bangla here. Either I can use it and I have no idea what they say back to me, or I can use it and then the conversation automatically goes to English. So I got survival phrases down, but breaking into conversational Bangla is where I'm struggling with. And that's where you really need to put in the perseverance. So if you're a foreigner, just keep pushing, say, hey, Jolim Bangle kotha bolbo, or something like that. Push them to speak in Bangla. If you're a Bangladeshi, don't just tell me I'm cute. Help me, please. Right, so really support, really try to help as well. We would appreciate it very much.
Okay. This is a success story of a foreigner learning Bangla. So, okay, thank you so much from Multilingual Club. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Thank you so much for learning Bangla. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Good luck.